Good afternoon, YouTube. Title says why I put 64 gigs of RAM into my Windows gaming laptops. An Asus TUF F17 8-core all-performance core, 2.3 gigahertz base clock with a 4.6 overclock. Oh yeah, and I got 64 gigs of RAM in her. 3 terabytes worth of storage between two different internal drives I put in there. And yeah, I got a 4 gig NVIDIA 3050 graphics card, which will share system RAM if need be to get me extra playability here. Of course, I will suffer a little bit of FPS, but that's the way it goes when you don't have 8 gigs of video or more. All right, most of you always buy the wrong bloody computer. But then again, you can always upgrade because it's a PC after all, right? So that's a good sign. But why 64 gigs? People tell me I'm nuts. You're crazy. You're nuts. You're a lunatic. You don't need 64 gigs of RAM in a freaking PC. It's a gamer system. You don't need that much RAM. Apparently they don't play real games. Look, I'm running Windows 11 because, well, my laptop came with it anyway. But regardless of that fact, it's got Windows 11, which currently chews 10.3 gigs of RAM just to the bloody desktop. You don't get the RAM back when you fire up any program, period, including games. Games also have specifications of what they require. One of the games I happen to have is called Decimated. All right? It's minimum to just play it. Okay? Is an i7 or i5 processor. Of course, they don't tell you any models or speeds, but that's fine. 16 gigs of RAM for the app. But I got 16 gigs. No, you don't. You got about maybe 5 and a little bit left over out of 16 because of your OS, okay? An NVIDIA graphics GeForce GTX 1080 with 8 gigabytes of dedicated video RAM on it, okay? Windows 10 is the minimum OS. Shader model version 6.0 and free drive space of 35 gigs. That's the bare minimal to play Decimated, which is a crazy cool game. And the graphics are pretty nuts once you jack them up. The recommended, now this would be 1080p medium graphics, by the way, is all you're going to get. All right. AMD Ryzen 5 3600X, or better, obviously. RAM, 32 gigs for the game to fire up. An NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 with 8 gigs of dedicated video RAM. Windows 10 shader model is the same, 6.0, and same drive space. Now, I don't know if you've seen Decimated, but you can download it 100% free from the Epic Game Store, okay? So you gotta check it out, it's cool. I play that game at 1600 by 900 medium graphics, and I can pull off around 60 frames per second, which makes it pretty playable. If I dump it into 1080p, I have to go low graphics, 1080p, and I get about 35, 37 frames per second. Not as playable. So yeah, I gotta dump her down a bit, okay? Because I'm missing the 8 gig graphic card. I've only got 4. And stealing system RAM, it will do to get me my 8. But then, of course, that means I need even more RAM in my computer, right? But at the same time, my system RAM is slower than my video card RAM, so it slows down my video card because it's a bottleneck, okay? But it makes it playable. And as long as you can get at least 60 frames per second out of the puppy, it's actually not bad. The graphics could be a lot nicer and smoother and richer and mwah, but you need a lot more power. You need an actual 8 gig graphic card for that, okay? And you're going to need 32 gigs of RAM to get to medium graphics at 1080p, all right? Now, I did learn a little trick, though, with Windows, okay? Let's go into my display settings. And where is it? It's in here somewhere. And I always get these ones mixed up. Okay, here we go. Right now, I have a desktop mode of 1440p, which is 2.5K. If you reduce this down to 1080p, because you're a gamer, because I'm running an external 4K display, okay? I share my same display between my Mac and my laptop because my laptop's over in the corner. All right, and if I dump this down to switching it to 1080p, that will also help improve game performance. So that when you go to 1080p, right, in the game, it will actually give you a bit more FPS. But because I'm at 2K here and I go 1080p in the game, I actually lose a lot of FPS, but I can gain some back to get up to 60 if I dump it to 16 to 900 full screen, okay? Because this way I still keep it full screen. But the graphics are good, but they could be better, right? So, but I still got to get down to, being able to get my 90 frames per second. Now, my monitor only has a 60 hertz refresh, and I am hoping that should I be able to get a new Mac this year, I'm also going to switch up to a higher refresh rate monitor because, yeah, you do get a bit of screen tearing at 60 hertz in a lot of games, but there are a lot of games that are fine. But decimated and, things like Cyberpunk, you're going to get a little bit of screen tear with that 60 hertz refresh. It's not bad, though. I mean, it's kind of minor, but it is there, right? And anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, you can go into here and you can say list all modes, and you can find 1080p here, 59 hertz, and switch it and hit apply. Now, of course, you're going to get a much bigger desktop, which is going to really suck donk when it comes to surfing the internet. But, I mean, you can do it, right? So if we go fire up the internet here, okay, for example, it's like, that's pretty big and pretty clean and legible, but it's a little on the biggie side even for me. I don't like that, right? But if I want the best results out of gaming, I need to set my display itself to 1080p. All right, then I can get even more out of it. Okay, so it's, and I can share up to 32 gigs of system memory too, which is nice. And it'll share it with my video card. So, but it does slow down your video card and how well it's going to operate, especially when you don't have that 8 gigs, right? Anyways, but I kind of like being at this whole, 1440p 60 hertz range. So that's where we're going to go. And then I just have to change other things, and I'm fine, okay? So am I nuts for going to 64 gigs? No, because look at Cyberpunk, okay? Cyberpunk on 1080p medium graphics, the recommended requirements to get there is going to be 16 gigs of RAM for the actual program, plus your Windows OS, whatever it chooses, you add that on as well, and then you also require a 8 gig graphics card for Cyberpunk. Now, when you look up Cyberpunk, for example, okay, so Cyberpunk 2077 specs. All right, now it's going to tell you, memory is 12 gigs. Now, this is the minimum stuff. 6 gig graphic card, etc. Now, there are charts for Cyberpunk as well. That are going to give you even more information as to requirements here, right? Like they tell you like OS processor, all this stuff, and I mean ultra graphics, 60 frames per second is all you can expect there. In the ultra setting, that's a 2K, Core i9 or Ryzen 9 7900X. GeForce RTX 3080, Radeon RX 7900 XTX, 12 gigs of video RAM. That's pretty raunchy now, isn't it, huh? 12 gigs of video now, 20 gigs of RAM, okay? And if you add ray tracing onto that crap, okay, which I can do ray tracing on my computer, well, now I'm up to 24 gigs of RAM up here, and it's like, holy cram, like, gee whiz, seriously? Now, you're still going to need 70 gigs either way, but they have like, you know, ray tracing ultra, ray tracing overdrive, ray tracing low. I mean, even ray tracing low, you know, video RAM 8, main RAM 16. Okay, I mean, you gotta have it. And they want a real graphics card. Okay, I mean, I'm a 4 gig graphic card, NVIDIA 3050, and I got a steel system RAM that slows down my video card because it bottlenecks, right? Because my VRAM is faster than my regular RAM. So, yeah, I mean, and I can get Cyberpunk up to like 90 frames per second without a question. But I have to go with medium graphics at 1600 by 900. Okay, and if I want over 100, I go to low graphics. And I don't really like the low graphics setting that much, but medium is nice. It's very nice and playable at medium, okay? So I don't mind. And besides, if you can't get along with, you know, 70 to 90 frames per second, I don't know. I mean, the game is nice and playable. But when you're trying to do 1080p medium graphics, well, that's going to be a little chunky monk. And the game is like 45, 50 FPS kind of thing. It's like, it's kind of playable, but it could be actually better, especially when you're in a fight. And when you get into a fight with somebody, you better have some extra frames per second, which is why I leave it now at 16 by 9 at medium, because I can now get into a fight and I don't have to worry about, oh, this is getting slow and I'm getting shot to death, right? You know, it's like, you know what I mean? So, anyways, but that's, you know, we want to play AAA titles, we pay the price, which means we need RAM and we need video RAM. Now, I can't upgrade the video in my laptop, but I can always get a new computer. Now, of course, I still got to finish paying off this laptop. Then I'll have enough credit built up with the MDG. And then I'm looking at an i9 system with a 12 gig video card, because I want better gaming performance, you know. And that computer comes with 32 gig of RAM, and I'm going to knock that bugger up to about 96. Okay, if I can do it. I don't know. It depends on how many slots are on the motherboard. I don't get a clear enough picture of the motherboard to know, but as much RAM as I can jam under the hood of that sucker, it's getting it. Okay, I mean, seriously, I mean, gaming is getting more and more and more demanding, you know. And, but yeah, people think I'm nuts, and it's like, well, this is why, because, you know, Windows wants X amount. When I bought my gamer laptop, it came with 11 anyways, but I wasn't chewing that much RAM at the time with that version of 11. We've had like a bazillion upgrades since. But it came with 16 gigs. And you can't say, okay, well, I bought a computer with 16 gigs of RAM, so yeah, Cyberpunk wants 16 gigs. You know, even if you have 16 gigs of RAM and an 8 gig video card, you're still not playing Cyberpunk with any kind of real results, because you don't have 16 gigs of RAM for the game. You only have 16 in the computer, and Windows takes what it takes, right? And and like I said, when you launch a game, you don't get the RAM back, because Windows is still running in the background, you know, behind your game, right? So you're not getting RAM back. And these aren't Macs, so, you know, they don't have a gamer mode to free up RAM, you know, how that works. So, I mean, you've got to have real RAM. That's all there is to it. I mean, even 32 gigs of RAM is still not even enough, really, even for my current computer to say, yep, Decimator's okay and Cyberpunk's okay. So I need the 64 gigs, because you're going to be using a lot. Just as a quick math lesson for you, okay, let's go into what we're using here. All right. So we've got 10.6 gigs of RAM. Okay, so we know we got 10.6. So 10.6. Hello, get over here. So 10.6. Now that's what Windows is chewing. Plus, Cyberpunk is 16, right? That's fine. No big deal. So 10 and 16 is 26.6 gigs of RAM. Now, if you have an 8 gig video card, it stops there. But if you only have a 4 gig like me, well, like I said, you're going to get a bottleneck, so it'll still slow you down, even though it'll take that extra to give you the 8. So we add 4 for me, okay? That's 30.6. Now that'll get me 1080p medium graphics in, high 40s, early 50s, but it's still, you gotta hit 60 plus pretty consistent to be playable, especially in AAA gaming, right? But that's almost half the damn RAM I put in my computer. So if you only got 16 gigs of RAM in your computer, well, you're going to be in virtual swap, which SSDs are not the same speed as RAM. There's nothing faster than RAM. Okay, so yeah, your SSD ain't fast enough. Sorry. You're going to be in swap. It's going to be very chunky. It's going to be very choppy. It's not going to be a good experience for you. Okay, and this is why we need RAM in our PCs. I mean, we need RAM in Macs too, whether we're gaming, video editing, or whatever. But we got a lot more games on PC, that's for damn sure. So now you take a game to the recommended specs like decimated, right? Or, yeah, decimated. So there's 10.6, whoops, 10.6 for that, plus recommended 1080p medium for decimated to get, I don't know what FPS, probably 50, 60 frames per second, right? It wants 32 gigs of RAM, okay, for the app, right? We remember that. Now that's 42.6 gigs out of my 64 gone. Now, I don't have the 8 gig video card that Decimated wants, so I gotta add 4 gigs worth to add with my 4 gig card, and I'm gonna get bottled a little bit, so, but hey, okay. That's 46.6, minus that from 64 gigs. That leaves me 17.4 gigs free. And I'm gonna need that free because the game will use more if I raise my graphic level. Now, I've been playing that game at 1080p low, and I'm okay to get 60 frames, okay? At 16 by 900 medium, I can also get 60 frames per second. But at 1080p medium, it's a little bit different, okay? It's going to be a little bit draggy, right? So, yeah. And if you want to go to like the ultra settings of Decimator, be prepared for a lot more RAM usage for the app and probably a lot more video power too, because you're going to need to get into that 12 gigabyte video card, right? Kind of like Cyberpunk. You want ultra, with or without ray tracing, you need friggin' video power, man. I'm telling you. All right? And this is why I went to 64 gigs of RAM in my computer. All of these games, even though a couple of them are pretty raunchy hardcore, I got to alter some settings. Everything else I can run at 1080p or 2.5K, even up to 4K. I have no issues. Okay? But a few of these, like Cyberpunk and Decimated, yep, I gotta lower some settings, man, or I ain't playing these games with a snot. And Decimator hits me even worse than Cyberpunk does. And I thought Cyberpunk was one of the most demanding games. Well, it is, but Decimator is even more demanding, or Decimated, sorry, is more demanding than Cyberpunk is, like completely. And it's like, holy cow, this is nuts. So anyway, that's why. See you in the next video.